It's taking the time. It's like, okay, it's still not here.
Yeah, I think it started recording.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the fourth edition of Hausa International Book and Arts Festival 2024. My name is Khadija, and I'm here with Saddiq. Saddiq, please, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thank you so much, Khadija. This is the first time actually like seeing you and talking, but I've known you for I don't know,
Yeah,
like
for quite a number of years.
yeah. So this is exciting. My name is Saddiq Dzukogi. Um, I'm a poet. I'm an assistant professor of English and also like affiliate faculty of African American Studies at Mississippi State University. I am excited to join you all, and kudos to all the international and the great work that the Hausa International Book and Arts Festival is doing. You know, like in platforming Hausa culture and literature, and just being a pusher of like cultural reformation. You know, like across the board.
Yeah, it actually is. They're doing wonderful. Well done, Sada and team. So my first question is, do you remember your first poem? And if you do, what was it about? What was it called and what was it about?
Yeah, I suddenly remember my first poem. I have it memorized. It's called Nepa. Then they were called Nepa. So
Please, do you know what? Please, can you just recite it? It's already memorized.
yeah, I mean, it was something I jotted down in my notebook that my mom gifted me, and it was just like a reflection. I think I was like either 12 years old or maybe 11. I'm not sure, but this is the poem. Nepa took light on Thursday. Brother Salisu traveled to Abuja on Thursday. Brother Salisu came back on Friday. Nepa didn't come back on Friday.
I'm so sorry. No, I love it. I love it. That's actually so sweet.
Yeah.
That's actually so sweet. Um, do you know it's actually interesting because so I do usually stalk people before I talk to them on book chat. So of course I did, a bit of homework, and I saw that you recently granted this interview for the student newspaper of Mississippi State University, and you said I just enjoy to tell the story of my life and the story of the places that have impacted me and the people that have impacted me. And honestly, listening to you recite the poets, I was like, you know what? Yeah, that's it. That's actually that was true when you were 12. But how true is it today, especially with Bakandamiya?
Yeah, I mean, I've been asking myself the question again and again, what does poetry afford? You know, like what can it do if you can string together sentences? You know, like am I going to write about flowers? Am I going to write about the moon? It took me a while to be able to answer, like why it matters to me. And it's like a simple epiphany, right? I just realized pretty recently that, like I'm the poet of my people, right? Because like, especially from being from northern Nigeria, I'd meet people here and they would ask, where are you from? Like, what does it look like? And I think the North at large is like a very misunderstood, like place. A lot of people think they know the North, but they do not know, right? There's like a whole lot of stereotype about the North. Um, so like when I started thinking about platforming some of the stories, like that I grew up hearing from my grandmother, like some of the beautiful things that occurred, like during childhood, how I would chase after Mirake and Byrick, and like how I would play football in the neighborhood, like all of the beautiful things that were happening, like Tashi during Ramadan. Like it was something that I wanted to bring to the forefront, like, and like begin to have conversation about, right? Because like there are like a lot of beautiful things, and sadly some of the things that we hear from northern Nigeria is like always northern Nigeria is written in close proximity to violence, in close proximity to hunger, like, and this is not to say all of those things like are not true, but like it's not the only story,
Whole
like
story. Yeah.
of the North. It's like a very beautiful place. And I've had the privilege of traveling across Nigeria and, like like some of the problems that people want to pin to the North, it's not uniquely a Northern Nigerian problem, it's a Nigerian problem. And I was reading, specifically as it relates to Bakandamiya, I was reading some dude who was, I have forgotten, right? But he was talking about the North, and he said something that remained with me, right? I have forgotten his name, but like he said, these are a people without myth. And I'm like, well, that's not true, right? Because like to say that we're a people without myth is to say that we are not a people, right? Because like the implication of that is that we do not have stories.
We don't
And
have
that's far from truth, right? Like we have stories, beautiful stories, like we had spirituality, like before the coming of Islam, like there was a religious system, right? The Bori practices, like that varies across northern Nigeria, but the dominant one was the Bori practices. And like it's a sophisticated spiritual system. And I thought, like, what can I do with all of this, right? Like to highlight all of the stories, like to show that the North was like a really sophisticated society even before the coming of the white man, right? Which is fairly recent in history, right? If you're considering history, the larger scope of history, because we had people who could write, like more than 500 years ago. We had people writing poetry, like Nana Asma was writing poetry in the 1800s. And like even before that collision between the West, like in the North, we had music, like we had culture, we had literature, and there was trade. And so, like I thought it's high time, like we begin to reveal to the rest of the world these things about ourselves, and not just the rest of the world, but also ourselves, right? Because like there are like a lot of people who do not know the history of where they come from, which is sad. And all of that is getting lost. I remember when I arrived America in 2018, I went, I was like, where are my people? And what I meant by where are my people, like where are the Muslims, right? And so I went to the masjid and I prayed, and they asked me what my name is, and they're like, oh, like that's not how to say your name. I'm like, well, I've been saying it's Saddiq
all my life.
and I'm like not Arabic, but I'm not an Arab, right? But it's Saddiq. And they're like, oh, Saddiq. I'm like, yeah, whatever.
If you insist.
Yeah, whatever. But that got me thinking about, like what it means, like for me to be named Saddiq, right? Something that is not indigenous to where I come from, right? And I started putting pressure on that and thinking about religion also like a colonizing tool, right? Because like if I'm relinquishing my culture, I'm relinquishing my name for another name, like that's textbook definition of, like what a proper colonized person would do. And I know, like we might be venturing into things that people would consider controversial, but, my relationship with Islam is unremarkable, right? Because I believe, right? But also the conversation is that, like I was somebody else, my people were somebody else, right? Before this sudden change. And like it's important, like to begin to engage with our history, like to not just preserve it, right, but like to facilitate, like a sense of being, right, that is indigenous to the land. Because like some of those things are really beautiful, right? All of the naming ceremonies now, like have changed, like we and I think there's a misconception between what's like an Islamic culture and what's an Arabic culture, right? Like those are two different things. But like we mash it together right now that like one is misunderstood for the other. There was a day I was asking, I was just being a mischief maker, and I told Saadatu, my wife, that, oh, like if we have a daughter, let's name her Daddy. And she was like, no, Daddy, that's a terrible name. I'm like, how about Layla? She's like, yeah, I like that name. I'm like, but they're the same thing. like,
Yeah.
but what that tells me is that, like we see, like those things as, like something that's not desirable, like, because dirty is like, that's a terrible name, they would say, right? But it's literally Layla. So like, I'm like, why can't I name a child dirty, right? I know my mom's going like, hell no, but yeah,
Yes, it is
yeah,
that.
that's just a reason, like, to put pressure on things and, like, begin conversation, that I think it's important, like, for our own well-being, right, to preserve history, to preserve ourselves.
Honestly, I love your answer. It's so rich, and you touched on so many things I want to talk about, but I'll get back to them.
Mm-hmm.
I really just want to. It's so funny that you mentioned, colonization and all of that, because I was having a conversation about things fall apart today, and one of the things we spoke about was how we actually had a way of life
Mm-hmm.
before the arrival of the British, and how Chinua Achebe just did a wonderful job highlighting that and talking about the civilization and all of that, and it was great. But that will lead us into a whole rabbit hole. Let's. But you did say something. You said people believe that we don't have myth. So in your collection, you have this character called Dorama. Was it Dorama? How do you pronounce it?
Dorama.
Dorama. Yeah. So you describe her as half sister, half spirit, and queen. And honestly, I remember when I was reading that, I was like, oh my God, I love this person. Like she's mythical, she's royal, she's spiritual, she's everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember thinking about, like, I know you mentioned, like, your grandma. I remember thinking about like Tasunian that my grandmother would tell me. And I'm like, she could have described this person. Like she actually like is giving Giza the Oki
Mm-hmm.
and all those two
Yeah.
ways. One was good, one was bad, all of that. And I found that so interesting. And while the book is really history heavy, I kept wondering to which extent is it Tanzania, because our culture is really Tanzania heavy if you think about it. So we can talk about Yanzu. There's Moana is in the cinemas.
Mm-hmm.
What's the second one? There's Wicked. There's all these like amazing Disney things,
Mm-hmm.
and they're all really great. But then, what if we actually take Taswinia and the Akage Amane when we're younger and
Mm-hmm.
actually bring them in literature and expose them? Like, this would actually go a long way. So, do you think, were you trying to kind of do that? Were you trying to do a throwback to the mythical stories that our grandparents would tell us growing up?
Yeah, it's and it's, like, that's a great observation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was thinking about all of those things, and like, I wanted to have more space for those. But there's a part of the book that literally, like, speaks about like an older woman who is, like, under the moonlight, and she's telling Tatsunya, actually, like, I use that same word in that section, and like, trying to transmit not just, like, stories, but also history, but also religion, like, and asking them not to turn away, like, from their history, because once you do that, you're turning away from yourself, right?
Mm,
If you allow yourself to be stripped off your story, like, you're bare, you're vulnerable. And all of those are important, like, and my grandmother, like, did the same to me. She had, like, several stories. I remember there was a time when my dad had a small recorder, and like, he would ask her to tell those stories, and he would record it. I think they transcribed it into a book or something, but I'm not sure, like, if I can find that. But the figure of Dorama, actually, she did exist. She's the queen, Adora.
and
Um,
she actually founded the right then at the end.
yeah, that's
That's the end of the poem.
yeah, that's the story. And like, I mean, I think she's a legend, because like, if you're trying to look at history, like, it seems like she lived for a very long time, and I wanted to justify that, and that's why I made her half spirit and half
Mm,
human, like, to kind of show that elongated mortality, right? That she she lived long. I don't even know if she died in the book. I think she didn't. But that's something that I didn't explore. But I wanted her to exist, and tell the story, like, of Daura, how, like, she moved, from Soham Burni to, like, the place that we call Daura right now for water. And I was finding justification. And so, like, a lot of the poem, like, tries to excavate history and also subvert history. Because, as you know, the story of Bayajidda, like, he came and he killed the snake and he became the hero. He married Daurama, and, like, set up the, seven house estate. So, like, I actually disagree, like, with the notion that, like, for a people whose history goes back, millennia, like, the person who's, like, credited as, like, a mythical figure of that place is not even from the place, right? Like, his name is Bayajida, right? Bayajida, right? Like, so the person who doesn't even speak the language, like, how are they, like, the mythical figure of the people, right? And, like, I disagree with that notion. But even though some historians, like, do not think that he did exist, like, but the perception is that he existed, right? And that's, I mean, the other things are, like, quite academic, right? But then people think that such a person existed, and they credit him, like, with the setting up of the seven house estates. And so I am interrogating it from that point of view and subverting that narrative, right? There's a figure, in the book whose name is, Suleimanu and Haske. So, like, he's like, an animist spirit that possess people. Like, when the Bori worship is done, they evoke spirits to take over a human body. And so, in the book, the subversion is that all of the heroic things that Bayajidda achieved, he achieved because of this animist spirit who had taken over his body, who had given him the power to do that. So in doing that, I'm, like, trying to domesticate, like, the triumph, right? And make it a triumph of the locals as opposed to this foreign person who came from Baghdad, right? To
This goes back to our previous conversation about colonization all over
yeah,
again.
yeah. And I quickly asked myself, like, sometimes I was actually having, like, a small debate with, Professor Ibrahim Malumfashi, who's, like, I think opinions that, like, Bayajidda didn't exist. I'm not sure if I remember correctly, but, like, I was thinking to myself after that Facebook exchange that, why are people willing to accept, like, this foreigner who came from Baghdad, but say they would find it incredibly difficult to accept, say, a foreigner, from,
We can
say,
talk about
Britain
this.
right now, right? Like, I mean, people talk about Bayajidda as if he's a Hausa man, like, he's not, right? And so what's the difference? Why? And, like, the reason is religion, right? Because, like, we have accepted religion that it's become local, to Nigeria, and because of that, like, we don't think about all of the stories, like, as, agents of colonization, right? Because, like, the stories are more potent in stripping people of their identity than even the canon gone, right? Like, stories are more effective, right? And that's why, like, even today, colonizing powers are always trying to control the narrative, because, like, that's how you truly win. And a proper colonized person would, like, believe the stories that they're told. And so, like, all of this work is, like, to subvert, like, that notion and reclaim agency over the myth of Bayajidda.
I love your response so much. I think that it's wonderful. But it made me wonder, um, did you have to do a lot of research to write this book? Because there's a lot of information in this book.
Yeah.
And, just it's heavy with historical accuracies, with even dates and cities and everything. Like, so how much research did you have to go through?
Yeah, I was reading. I have been reading a lot, even before I knew I was going to write the book, because I recall yesterday, I'm still actually working on the book. Sent it yesterday to the publisher, and we had to cut 40 pages. You know, like the book was 100 and
Oh, wow.
100 and 140 pages or thereabout, and we had to. It was
Poetry.
yeah,
Oh,
we had
dude,
to.
that's well.
But it's, you know, like good to make it tighter and all of that. But some of the research dates back to when I was still in ABU. You know, I had just sit in my room and read up on, you know, like Nigerian history. I would Google, you know, like the first coup in '66, which is, you know,
Yeah,
like
I'm coming to that.
yeah, this is the first coup in '66, and you know, like all of that history that a lot of people are not aware of. And also, like, I had the good fortune of, you know, like participating in a play when I was I think I was maybe 10, 11, 12. I am not sure how old I was, but you know, I wasn't 15 yet. My uncle wrote a book titled Bayajidda, and I acted in the play. I was one of the people who were like pretending to have killed the snake, because when Bayajidda, according to the legend, when he killed the snake, you know, like and he left his turban, you know, like at Kosogo well. And so a lot of people from the town were like trying on the turban, and you know, like Doroma said, you know, like whoever the turban fits, you know, like must have killed the snake, right? Because it means it's their turban. And you know, like I was, you know, like part of the villagers who were trying it.
Cinderella.
Yeah. So all of that, you know, like all of that knowledge, you know, like that I've learned as an actor, that's the only time I've acted in my life. All came to bear when I was writing the book. But of course, you know, like I was doing like a lot of research that led me even to the Malian Empire, to the Songhai, and in all of that, you know, like I was fascinated how connected we are as a people, particularly, you know, like in the West African side of things. And that tells me that all of the disruptors, you know, like disruptions were because of colonization, right? At different intervals, you know, like different people came to conquer the continent. First, it was, you know, like the slave raiders from North Africa, and Islam came by way of trade. And so, like, it was a rabbit hole that I enjoyed, that I still want to explore more of. But a lot of people don't know the strong connection even between the Tuareg and, you know, like northern Nigeria. Like literally, there are like a lot of Tuareg names. I mean, I think Daura itself is, you know, like Tuareg word, right? A lot of people don't even know. So it's like spillover, one empire dissolve, another emerges, and dissolve emerges until, you know, like we started from Ghana, moved to Mali, and I think the Songhai, and then, you know, like the Tuareg, and then also Hausa. Like it all fuses into together, you know, like in really interesting ways. And I hope that, you know, like in the future, I'd have, you know, like time to, you know, like also explore that, because I think these are important connections that we need to retrace, right? Because like we are so, I don't know, like there's like just too many map lines, right, that have divided us, right? And so like even in this book, there's, I wasn't sure where Soham Birni was, right? And so what I did in that particular poem is to say they came from Niger, right, from Agadez. And that's not accurate, right? Like I don't know, but it was just a way to recreate, you know, like a story from the fragments that I was able to trace.
Honestly, it's great. I think that you did it so well. Like I was reading it, and I could believe that they came from Agadez. Like I wouldn't have had any reason to doubt that, for the fact that you're literally telling me. Do you know what? I'm just going to take it as they came from Agadez, and we'll just call it a day.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
um, but another thing, honestly, I feel like if we go through the scramble for Africa, that would just open a kind of worm. So let's just keep that aside. Um, yeah. But one thing you mentioned, you were talking about the history, and you mentioned 1966, and I was actually so excited to ask you this because I read this poem about the assassination of Ahmad Balu,
Mhm.
and it was like I was reading it, I was holding my chest like, oh my god, that's a great grandfather somewhere. But then it made me wonder, like, why did you think? I know that the book slash poem slash collect. It's not even a collection. It's one.
It's one point.
It's yeah. It's really history heavy as a book.
Mhm.
But I wondered why you chose this particular moment, the assassination of Ahmed Balu, among all the other moments that he did. Like, why did you want to talk about it? Why did you want to highlight it? Do you think that the impact of his death can be felt today in northern Nigeria?
Yeah,
And if so, how?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, like that's one story that is not always told properly. And yeah, there's like a lot of reason why the Civil War happened, but like that's an important marker too. But like a lot of times when we have this conversation, people just want to conveniently skip that over. And I, like read a lot of that, but really, I just at first, I mean, that's the period where we have like I don't want to say contemporary fathers of Nigeria, but like they're like the founding fathers of Nigeria, like at that particular time, Nigeria in that iteration, right? Because we existed as a people, before the coinage Nigeria, but the spirit Haske, like I wanted to bring him back in time, right? Because this is like a spirit that is an immortal, right? He's still apparently somewhere right now, right? And I wanted to show that he's been present, like, and he's seen how the North has changed, like from the time of Daurama to the time of Daurama and Bayajidda, like that's like roughly around maybe the 1300s, the 9th century, like it varies depending on who you're listening to. And so the book is in 3 movements, right? The first movement is the beginning, the coming of Bayajidda, and then the next book was 66, and I wanted to have like a space not just to critique like the Nigerian society, but also like the North, to look at it critically and like interrogate like the loss of spiritual religion and like the kind of replacing of that with Islam. And so he made a return in 66, right? That's when the spirit came back, because like after Serki the snake in the well Kosogo was killed, I think Haske decided to go on exile, right? Because like people stopped worshiping, Islam began to take root, and like I think he wasn't happy with that, so like he went on exile and returned in 66. And when he returned, he was complaining about also like colonization, like from the Westerners right now, and like lamenting that like if the Northerners have continued to worship him and his kind, he would have protected them, right? And he's moving around, and it happens that he landed when Nzogu, like went to Ariwa House and like assassinated Ahmadu. And so I thought that would allow me to talk about that period that led, that fast tracked the Civil War, which, like each time when we're talking about the Civil War, people do not like to talk about that, right? Apparently it's because of the Victor no vanquish, which I think it's harmful, right? Because like they're like still those fault lines abound, like in Nigerian fabric, and you're pretending that things didn't happen, or like just sitting on things wouldn't resolve any of those fault lines. In fact, it would make it worse, right? And it also like allows for wrong perception and like mischaracterization also of history, right? Because like nobody talks about it. And so I thought it was an opportunity to address that, like from the point of view of a Northerner, right? Because like those conversations are never present in our literature, right? Like particularly as it relates to the Civil War. And so I thought it was an opportunity, like to talk about that, and also to kind of foreshadow, like some of the societal struggles that we're having. And, like those can be traced back to that period, right? Because like it's also like a period where we squandered, like the trust that we have, like for each other as Nigerians, right? And that's something that I think we haven't been able to mend. And like to mend that, we would have to have honest conversations about, like things. We have to address grievances, like from both side, because like all I was saying in that particular place is that like a lot of victims, of that period, and it's not just like one side. Hopefully like people take it well, but I think that's an essential thing. And like as artists, one of the things that we can do is to make such interventions, right?
How do you think your readers would react to it? Like, how do you think they would take this story? And I'm asking because, on one hand, I can see people kind of feeling angry all over again towards Igbos and just Eastern Nigerians because, you took away Ahmed Bello. But on the other hand, I can see people thinking, like, we had like Yanzu when we have conversations about leadership in Nigeria, there are very few northern leaders that they'll mention. So if you say leaders in Nigeria, you hear Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, you hear the same names, right? And a chickens like that in Hausa. So I guess my question is like what is the reaction you hope/expect from northern Nigerians when they read that?
Yeah, for me, I just like want people to know their history. That's it. Like and there's no reason to be antagonistic, like towards anybody. Like it's just the reality of things that happen. And I think like even in the book, when like people get opportunity to read all of it, it didn't point fingers, right? But just recounting of what actually happened, right? That's what it was doing. And I'm doing it from the point of view of like trying to trigger like true healing, right? If there was a villain of the story, like is the person who like shot Ahmadu, like, and Hafsat, his wife, who was pregnant at that particular time. Like that's the villain of the story. And he's a villain not because he's evil or anything. He's a villain because he's a villain, right? Because he did a bad thing. And that bad thing, like wasn't because he was, I mean, I'm not going to speak to what his politics was at that particular time, but like it's and people are always doing this, right? I mean, even when we talk about some of the problems that we have in Nigeria, you'd hear on social media, like somebody was like, oh, Nigeria is a terrible country. Look at what Nigeria would never cease to amaze me. And it's a story about somebody who had stole something. I'm like, Nigeria has nothing to do with this. Can you please name the person who had done a bad thing? Like Nigeria is not a person, right? Like
you told them he was a Nigerian prince.
Yeah. They're like, oh, like there was a time that there was like a helicopter crash, and I saw a friend, like on Facebook, he's like, Nigeria, if nothing doesn't kill you, Nigeria would kill you. I'm like, I don't feel good about that, right? Because like we have a lot of problems, right? But when you don't name what the problem is, you're not ready to solve the problem, right? Or you know what I mean? Because like if somebody steals money, yeah, like if a politician embezzles money and you're on social media saying, oh, Nigeria is a very corrupt place, like like it's terrible, Nigeria is terrible, look at what Nigeria is doing. I'm like, you're letting the bad guy off easy, right? Because you're not even naming the bad guy, right? Like I'd listen to that and like there's nothing, right? So why don't we just name the person who had done the thing, as opposed to this thing called Nigeria that, like, it's nothing, right? Like, what's that? It's just a name, right? But it does something terrible, right? Which is, like, it portrays, like, the entity Nigeria, and whatever ideal that we're trying to build, like, that just rubbishes it, right? Because, like, tell me one country whose citizens, like, you'd hear deriding, like, the country, like, the way that Nigerians do, right? People like, oh, Nigeria has a bad name. Nigeria has a bad name because Nigerians have chosen to give it a bad name, right? And this is not to say that, like, a lot of things are not, this is not to say things are rosy and beautiful, and this is not to romanticize, like, my nation. But I'm like, if we're really trying to hold people accountable, then we have to hold them accountable even in our language, right? We have to hold them accountable in the way that we name the perpetrators, like, a bad deal. If there's somebody who had done corruption, like, say, so person stole so money, right? Like, don't say, oh, Nigeria would kill you. Like, what does that even mean, right? Like, what does that say? That doesn't tell any story, right? It's just, at best, a lazy stereotype, right?
Yeah, yeah, and honestly, I do agree with you. We do have to name these things and hold people accountable. But that's how they'll go and ban Twitter again. And honestly, yeah, I know. Personally, I'll feel personally victimized if they do that. But it's actually true. It's I mean, it did happen in history anyway. It's not even saying it's right or it's wrong. It's just, it is what it is, and
Yeah.
people just have to get over it, I guess.
Yeah, plus, like, well, what does it say about a person, like, who shot a pregnant woman? Like, those are the things that I'm asking. Like, why do we think it was okay, right? Like, a lot of people didn't even know, right? I still remember, like, and this is Major Kaduna Nzogu, who was beloved, right? Like, in northern Nigeria, and like, he was even named Kaduna, right? Like, so, like, people don't talk about that, right? Um, but what does it say, like, about a person who would shoot, like, a pregnant woman and kill the husband, and then, like, go on TV and say he was a coward because he was, like, running, like, and this is the thing, like, even this morning I was thinking about that, right? Like, if you, it was just bad, right? Because, like, they also dragged his body all around Kaduna, right? Like, just to show that, like, oh, like, we can do this, and we did this,
Yeah, it's
right?
more real.
Like, and this is somebody who is beloved, right? And now, like, violence is not justifiable, right? And it should never be justified. But, like, that's like provocation, right? Like, that's like provocation.
Yeah,
And all the book is saying is that, like, we have to talk about these things, like, honestly. If we truly are committed to change, like, if we're truly committed to unity, we have to hear, like, the grievances of each other. We have to, like, seize the 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 demonization of the other, like, whatever it is, like, I mean, we just have to confront that, right? And not dehumanize people in ways that I see people do. And all I am doing, like, is just to retell the history that I know happened, which is, like, a true history. Like, a lot of people didn't even know that, like, after Ahmadu Bello was assassinated, like, there's, like, a lot of propaganda songs about how, like, we killed, like, your leaders, and, like, you're not doing anything, you can't do anything about all of the songs that were being sung in the barracks, like, to demean northerners, like, that actually happened, and it was, like, widely covered, like, in news reportage. But a lot of people didn't even know that. Yeah, a lot of people didn't know that people were printing almanacs, like, and pictures on bread leaflet with Sardaruna's corpse being stomped. Like,
yeah.
people didn't know that, right? So, like,
Mhm.
what? Like, people didn't know that. So I'm saying, like, if we have to move
Tell that
forward,
story.
like, we have to, like, talk about all of the things, even our own complicity, right? Because there are, like, a lot of people who, of course, killed, like, people who didn't do anything to them, like, And that's terrible, right? And we can have all of those conversations. In fact, people have been having that conversation. The only conversation is that, like each time we talk about the Civil War, it just, by convenience, like people don't want to talk about the coup that happened in 66, right? And also, like how that instigated the retaliatory coup of June 66 and July 66. And then, like how things just, deteriorated and like spiraled out of control, and like we had that unfortunate history where a lot of people lost like their lives for no reason, like for no reason.
I want to move on to my next question, but I really just wanted to comment on something you said. Because I remember when I was reading the poem, you actually did mention the pregnant, that Hafsat was pregnant. And I think the image is so vivid in my memory because I think he was aiming to shoot at Ahmed Bello and she kind of just jumped to protect him and say her beta. And he didn't even think twice about it. Like, you know what? If I'm going to have to shoot you to shoot your husband, then that's what I'm going to do. And actually, I was just like, oh my God, like, this is actually a monster. So, yeah, when you mentioned she was pregnant, like, I was already feeling all these feelings again. So, yeah. Anyway,
yeah, it's a difficult
it's difficult to even think about it. It's a very difficult thing. But anyway,
yeah, I think
I want us
that
to
line is like only a beast would kill a pregnant woman, and in the end he proves himself a despicable beast.
yeah. And then he kind of changed the narrative and
Yeah, I
the
mean, yeah.
yeah, anyway, that's history. So still talking about that, Agades to the rap poem, there was something in the poem that like it was the poem meant a lot to me, because it's talking about people that were being forced to leave their homes because their homes were no longer safe for them, and they're finding a new home elsewhere, and it's a completely different country. They don't know anybody, they're starting afresh, all of that. And I hope you don't mind me talking about this, but it really it made me think about you and how, because when you wrote your first book, your crib my Qibla, it was really your daughter had died in Nigeria, Allah Jiganta Laga Fatamata, and it's now you live in America. So I guess one of the questions I had was, did you kind of see yourself reflected in that poem? Did you see like that whole journey with the camels? Obviously, not literally camels, but the journey with the camels and the food and everything. Did you kind of see yourself leaving Nigeria to America to kind of get away from, the memories of your daughter? Because I know, because we've had conversations around that time, and I know that even like looking at her crib would bring memories. You would go, hold her bed sheets, kind of thing, smell them, hug them, all of that. So I know your mental health was really not there. So would you say that that relocation to America kind of reflect, like, did you see yourself in this poem because of what had happened to you?
Um, and that's a tough question.
I'm sorry.
Actually, today is the 7th anniversary of her death. Yeah, she died 12. Yeah, but I think moving to America was like very difficult because I had wanted to come here because of her. I wanted to be more because of her. Like she inspired me a lot, right? One day as a year, she's just playing. I returned from Kaduna, and I absolutely love Kaduna. And I wanted to be more, right? Because I'm like, oh, like I want to give the world to this person, and like, how can I do that? And the only thing that came to mind is that like I have to like make sure that I'm the best version of myself. And I'm like, what else can I do? And at that time I had a good job, like at Yasmin Arufai Foundation. I enjoyed it, like set it up, creative writing clubs, and like mobile library, and I had opportunity to bring writers to Kaduna. It was fun, but I just wanted more, and I thought maybe I should go back to school and finally like think about poetry as something that can be like a serious career. And so like when we had to go without her, it was difficult because the week that I finished my application for University of Nebraska was actually the week that she passed. So it was, like incredibly difficult. But I mean, I posted something on Facebook this morning, which I, like normally do when it's her birthday, like the days of the anniversary. It just feels like a journal for me.
You're honoring her.
Yeah, and I was writing that. When she died, people told me that with time, like I'm gonna heal, and I'm like, it's been 7 years, and it's I haven't healed, but I'm now practiced at carrying that grief with grace. It's surely gotten easier, but it hasn't become easy. And right now, I think enough time has passed for me to finally acknowledge that it would never be easy, but it would get easier to carry, right? But it's that absence is always going to be here, right? It's always going to be here. But with the book, in that particular section, I mean, the book is divided into book 1, book 2, book 3. Book 1 and 2 is literally told from the perspective of Haske, and sometimes Bayajidda is also talking, and Haske, who's Suleimanu, is the same person. He's morphing into bird, he's morphing into minstrel, he's morphing into a boy, he's morphing into Almajiri. He's like just transforming, and with each transformation, he is encountering Bayajidda and kind of giving him direction, like teaching him about history, telling him about the history, the dye peaks of Kofar Mata and Kano, talking to him about Dalla Hill, just...
I love that. I love that reference. Like when I was reading it, I was like, this is Kano.
Yeah,
I'm so excited when I'm...
Yeah, like just talking, talking to him about, because Shatta and Nongweru and Mariah, Jaws, Barmani Chugi they weren't existing at that time, but he was telling him that they will exist, right? And this would be people who would be like the vanguard of the culture, and he was prophesizing their coming. So the book also talks a lot about the growth tradition in northern Nigeria. Bakandamiya is a poetic form that was popularized by the late Mamman Shatta. There's references to Shatta, references to Barmani Chugi, references to Hajia Lulu, who's also a great singer, but she's a Nupe woman. I'm just mixing all of those together. So I wasn't really, of course, I am present as the artist, right? But it's not my voice, right? Even with the Civil War, I'm not the one talking. It's this animist spirit that is talking, right? So it gives me, deniability, because I'm hey, I'm not the one who's saying it. It's this this spirit who had seen it.
Right? The conversation, to be honest.
Yeah, who had seen it, and he's telling us the things that he's seen, right? And I've met him. So I would make an entrance in the book, but this would be in book 3, which is the last movement of the poem. And some of the references, I've met Haske, but I don't know that he's a spirit. I've dreamt about him. So that's the way that I'm present in the book. And all of that's also autobiographical, talking about my grandmother, talking about some of my reflections about religion, history, talking about things that I miss about Minna, talking about all of these wonderful things, like of my childhood aspirations, and like where I'm physically present, like right now, even though it's not explicitly mentioned, like talking about my fear for the sky, for rainfall, talking about my fear for dogs, references to owls, talking about, like dreaming about afterlife, and waking up in the morning and talking to my wife about it, that, like I'd met Nietzsche, like, and in that conversation about afterlife, the poem, like reaches to Dante and reaches to T.S. Eliot. So, like a lot of weird things are happening in the book that I think,
Fair enough.
yeah.
I think we're almost out of time. Yeah, 10 minutes to go. So please, I want you to read the fourth poem. Because I feel like that's one poem in the book that I feel like speaks to the future. Actually, no, just read it and ask a question.
Sorry, I have a dry throat.
It's fine. It's winter. So,
Yeah, I hope this cough will allow me to read. Okay, I think I found it. Bakandamiya 4.
sorry.
Thank you. Do you think I can quickly go take some water?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I'd be back very quick.
Okay.
I am so sorry about that.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, I needed that water.
That's fine.
Yeah, all right, I'd read it. Bakandamiya 4. From afar, he could see the bright light of the village Dandali, shining like a star guarded inside a lantern. The 4 of night thickens in the air. He met Haske as a little boy playing with doll made of corn husk. Another boy, legs straddled around the tambourine drum, pounding it again and again with the inside of his palm until the dead animal skin moaned with the eloquent voice of the living. Because there is a line of ancestors behind us, a muted song continues to play in the lute of his bones. From his forehead to my chin, a scar of the spirit that roamed the courtyard of King Queen, drawn on 2 stone tablets, the transcribed pain of the past to be inherited by our offspring. One day we will disappear, but this town will grow into a dynasty, its shacks and raffia roofs transformed into architecture of stones and hard floors. The ground of Kofar Mata would be carved into mouths, dye pits that would last half 1,000 years and more, where indigo clothes would be born from the plain fabrics they swallowed, colorful clothing for the blue men of the Sahara, our own Bedouin tribe, We will sing in the blackening heat of the desert and still eat from the best of earth's provision. Our song is our history's tomb, carved into the ground below the wailing of anyone who cares to know. We are Haske, twins. Our limerick is the receptacle here. Because of praise songs, we remember what is blurring out at the edges, like chalk, tired from overuse. Looking frail, the horseman squints against the blue flames of our eyes and asks, where is the Kosovo well? Go to Dandali and ask Inna and her two princesses.
So I really love this poem. I think it's my favorite so far.
Sorry, my reading was bad because I was trying
No,
to.
no. It was actually good. It was good. You did better than I would have. I really like the poem, and you alluded to it earlier when you were talking about Husky talking about what Northern Nigeria would come to be in the future. And now this is it. Like this is actually what it has become. Even though at that time he couldn't possibly. Well, I guess he could have. He knew kind of.
Yeah. And there's still time for his prophecies to come true.
There is. So honestly, when I read this, I thought this would be an amazing poem to read at Hibaf because there's so many people in the room today that are well, I would take a wild guess and say more than 50% of the people in the room are from Northern Nigeria. So Northern Nigeria is very close to our hearts. We care about it. We want it to look like the likes of Marrakesh and Dar and Tunis and all of that. So there's that pride that we have in Northern Nigeria. So I guess my question is, I guess my question is, where do you think poetry, like, what do you think is the role of poetry in shaping the future that we want to see for Northern Nigeria?
Yeah. No. Go on, please.
I was going to say, and I want you to think about it in terms of, because now there's so many young Northern Nigerian poets, and oh my God, I'm so sorry. I know we are almost out of time, but I really just want to say this because I went for Kaba Fest this year for the first time, and I was on stage with Richard Ali, and I asked him about poetry in Northern Nigeria, and I think my question was something like, there hasn't been a lot of poems or not poetry coming out of Northern Nigeria, and I said it with so much confidence, and Richard was like, they
That's
have.
cool.
And I was like, you know what? I don't even know why I asked that because I know you, I know Alan Islam, Nasiba. I met Nasiba Babali there, and now she has a published book.
Yeah.
And while we're there, there was a poetry night. Kab Salim Muhammad was amazing. Salim, Abdul Jalal Musa Aliyu, like these were all like they were all on stage and they were amazing.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, oh my God, what was I thinking? Why did I ask that on stage? And now it's recorded forever. But so I want you to think about, like the question I asked you about, the role of poetry. I want you to specifically think about young Northern Nigeria. So people like Alan Islam, people like Nasiba Babale, like what would you tell them about what their poetry can do? How their poetry can shape the future of Northern Nigeria while as they set out to establish or find their voices and their audiences.
Yeah, I really want to put like any responsibility on anybody, right? Because they're just writers, like there are things that we need our politicians to do, and I think the purpose of the artist, like the poet, like the storyteller is to try to do justice, like to the narrative of the place, to tell the story of Northern Nigeria, right? Because like right now, I don't think we have like a single newspaper that is doing that work, right? We don't even have like a narrative that's represented, like in the media of Nigeria, right? We don't have TV stations, right? That's not true of the other regions, right? They're like a plethora of newspapers, TV stations, like that somewhat, like push the agenda, like of those places, right? This is not like a negative light, right? But like we also have, we need to have that kind of voice represented, like in the larger conversation in the context of like nation building and whatnot, because whatever thing that is said of northern Nigerians, like that just seem to stick, right? Because there's no pushback, there's no narrative pushback, and right now the only avenue that we have, like is like our poems, right? And I just encourage people, like to tell the stories of their lives, like I know that like things are not rosy and beautiful, right? But like it's not a simple story, and kind of correcting stereotypic narrative of northern Nigeria. I'd like love for people to engage in that. Like we have beautiful history, beautiful culture. I'd love for people to engage with that. But there are like a lot of poets, like coming out of northern Nigeria right now, and like not to court controversy, but like some of the most exciting voices in terms of poetry, like for me right now in northern Nigeria, there's like Abubakar Saddiq, he's like from Mina. There's
Didi,
yeah, there's Zainab
Zainab Bobi.
Mina, like there's Nasiba, as you've said. There's a lot of people, right, are writing incredible work right now. And I just hope, like there would be more spaces to support them, like spaces like like this, like that would push the work. And I think, like that incredible work has been done. So I just, I encourage them to continue to be themselves, right? Because they're like really doing great. And I read all of them, like it makes me incredibly happy. I mean, Saddiq can attest to that. Sometimes I just call him like, oh, like, have you read this person? I think they're doing exciting work. And I think also like what's his name? Abubakar Sidi, like he also like helps, like in mobilizing all of those voices. So that's like incredibly important. I think people are doing that, and more exciting voices are gonna come out. Also, even with what's the name? The festival in Kaduna, Kaba. Yeah, all of those festivals. I saw that one was done in Kano earlier. So all
Yeah, there was the Kano Poetry International Poetry Festival, and it's
yeah,
actually Nasiba and Salim were the ones that created that.
yeah. So like all of those things, like are incredibly generous of them, right? Because they're not only trying to find their own voices, but at the same time trying to platform the voices of others, which is like a practice at generosity. I just hope like we could do more together, like and just like push the voices of more people. But I'm excited about like the future, because right now seem to be secured, right? Because there are like a number of people who are writing, and particularly the one that makes me more excited is like there's like a lot of female voices right now, right? Because like especially in poetry, it's like very male dominated. So yeah, Zainab's doing great. Nasiba's doing great. I mean, Daisy was Daisy Ode. I haven't read a thing from Daisy in a while, but like Daisy's there. There are like a lot of people actually doing things quietly. I just hope like more attention would be given to them. And Sada is somewhere like troubling us. So yeah, maybe I should zip up.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this would be a great place to end. Do you know what? I really want to talk about the role of like these festivals in shaping Northern Nigerian poetry, but I think Sade will kill me. So I just want to end by I just want to say one final thing. I love that the advice that you said you would give the Northern Nigerian poets today is that they should just write their own stories and be themselves. And I say that because it kind of just takes this conversation a whole 360, because we started this conversation by talking about how your own poetry is about the story of your life and the story of the places that impacted you and the people that impacted you, and you're ending by giving the same advice to young poets today. And I just think that's wonderful. So without further ado, I'm sorry, forgive me. I hope you enjoy the rest of the festival. Welcome to Hibaf once again. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you, Saddiq, for your time.
Thank you so much. Yeah, very enjoyable.
Yeah.